Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's BAInsights. Today is a really interesting session talking about business model canvas. And I've got three excellent guests to talk about that very topic with us today. Shortly, I'll ask each of them to introduce themselves as usual. Before I do, if there's anyone viewing this who hasn't subscribed or hit the bell notification, please do, because it really does help. It'll also mean as well that you get the pleasure of seeing these videos a little bit earlier than normal. All right. Likewise, have you got any comments to say on what my guests are sharing or the topic itself? It's always nice to hear from you and hear what your perspectives are, especially if you've used the business model canvas as well. But without further ado, let's do some introductions. And I wonder we'll work our way through, ladies, if we could. Esther, starting with yourself.
Okay. Hi, good morning from my end of the world, everyone. It's nice to be here, and thank you so much, John. This is an amazing opportunity. I'm Esther Folorunso, my middle name Oluwabusayo. So I would always introduce myself as Esther Oluwabusayo Folorunso. I guess it's a Nigerian thing. Presently, I serve as the Vice President of Technology for the IIBA Tampa Bay chapter. I also work as the director, business and digital transformation, Hybrids, um, a consulting company, a tech company, cybersecurity, digital transformation, stationed or resident in Nigeria. Still working around a whole lot of modalities. I am a business analyst, very interested in digital transformation, not just interested. I do all things digital transformation. The business model canvas for me, it's something we have used and it's a tool I would really encourage people to use. So I'll say that's a brief introduction
Brilliant.
about
Thank,
me. Thank
thank you
you.
very much, Esther. And Thamer?
Hi, Thamer Miles. I work for Whitbread, who own Premier Inn, big budget hotel chain in the UK. I've been a business analyst for most of my tech career, but I've recently moved into a business architecture role. Um, I don't profess to be an expert in the business model canvas. So I've produced a few or worked collaboratively on a few. Haven't actually used them in sort of engaging with business stakeholders. So I'm really keen to learn from this conversation as much as sort of impart my own knowledge, and I hope that's okay.
That is perfectly fine. I mean, yeah, on the scale of things as well, Tim, I'm absolutely not an expert. So by comparative scale, you can consider yourself one. Anyway, but
Cool.
that's fine. Thank you very much. And last but not least, Helen.
Oh, hi, I'm Helen Winter. I'm currently an enterprise agile coach, but I've also been a director of my own consultancy, which I did for 15 years. Written a book called the Businessanalysis Handbook, and I've used the business canvas model a few times at different levels. So I've used it at company level for startup transformation initiatives and at launching new products as well.
Super. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Helen. And yeah, good to see you again as well. All right. So let's start then with Esther. And if Esther, if you can just explain to us from your perspective, what is the business model canvas, and how is it used as a business analyst?
Firstly, I would say it's a one pager. We're in an agile world, so we just need lightweight documentation. So, it's a one pager. It's a visual tool. It kind of simplifies what is like the elephant in the room. You're tr kind of trying to break the elephant into tiny bits. So I would say it's the way businesses try to demonstrate or break down their value proposition, like what they want to offer to people, or how to allow their business ideas to make sense. Oh, who are we going to service? What value are we providing? What revenues? What channel of distribution and things like that. So it just has nine building blocks that helps businesses to communicate their business ideas. And it's a collaborative tool. It's not something that's done in isolation. Like this is something you do with, say, your project team, for example. Oh, let's have a conversation. idea. What customer segment are we targeting? What's our value proposition? What channels are we going to use? What customer relationships are we looking at? Are we going to utilize? What's the revenue stream that's going to come from this business idea? What's the cost we're going to incur, and what other cost structures do we have in place? Another building block, I think that's going to be the resources. For example, what resources would be required to implement? What relationships do we need to leverage as an organization? So all these tiny chunks, tiny bits, I wouldn't call them tiny chunks now, tiny bits are basically what makes up the business model canvas. And in some spaces, it's actually referred to as the business initiative canvas. So most times you see people actually call it the BMC. Some people actually call it the BIC. Now, I have been in agile environments where we refer it to as the BIC. We had a session a couple of months ago with the Women in Agile Tampa Bay here in the United States, and we called it the BIC. And we were able to practically use it in a case study scenario. It was a hypothetical scenario, but we're able to drill down all the building blocks to ensure that we had something valuable to present. So I'll say that's the business model canvas.
Perfect, thank you. And you've also
explanation.
introduced Esther as well. You know, for anyone scratching their heads watching this, going, it sounds much like a business initiative canvas, if that was what they've used, or a BMC if they never knew the full name for it.
Exactly.
So yeah, so you've introduced that as well as obviously many of the nine areas, segments you want to call it out. Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thamer?
I'm not sure there's a huge amount that I can add to what Esther's just said. From a sort of how it might be used as a business analyst, though, one thing that I've found from the canvases that we've produced as a team of business analysts is that they're really useful for helping one another internally understand a key part of the business or particular proposition, product or service. So in some cases, for example, when we've had a contractor working on a particular project, we've asked the contractor to create a business model canvas sort of at the end of the project, which sounds a bit kind of counterintuitive because you might think it's the thing you start with to sort of then subsequently break down. But where we haven't had that at the start, we've asked them to create it at the end just to have a one-pager to sort of hand over to share with other members of the team. And I think, you know, for new starters or people unfamiliar with a particular line of business or proposition, that can be really, really useful.
It's interesting what you said there, Thamer, because I guess on that same basis, there will undoubtedly be a bunch of stakeholders that you're going to work with that will know little bits of the picture, but not see all of it. So bringing it into that one pager that yourself and Esther have outlined means that not only the team, but some people who you're working with can get maybe a broader view of the organisation they would have once had.
Absolutely, yeah.
And Helen, I know that the ladies haven't left much for you probably to talk about, but over to you anyway.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's just like 9 different ways of 9 different perspectives of viewing the business. So it's sort of I kind of link them into like customer related, like value adding, customer segments, channels. And then you've got things like external. So how do you want to deal with your key resources, your key partners? And then you've got like external stuff like your revenue streams as well, and internal and growth related stuff. So it's all just different ways of looking at it in like one page, which people kind of love because you haven't got loads of pages to walk through. It's all in one diagram. Like a diagram paints like 1,000 what's the word? Paints 1,000 pictures, isn't it? It's sort of like it all in one place. So in terms of business analysis, when I've done it, it's getting all the key leaders into the room to discuss it, and I've usually supplemented with a few other initiatives as well. And then I think the key point is, as a business analyst, is then to look at what you can then do with it. So, for example, you know, if you're identifying sort of key resources, you might want to then look at, well, how do you make that happen? So I've worked with transformation directors in the past where we've then gone, right, what now? And then that's kind of then, it's like, as Esther said, in terms of initiatives, it's like, right, what initiatives do we need to do to make this happen? And I would recommend doing an as is as well as a to be, because then you can look at where the differences are and then work out what initiatives you're going to do to then move between them.
Mhm.
And it's interesting you brought it up, because I was looking at it earlier on, thinking where does process fit in here? But I guess it's like the value propositions or somewhere in that realm is where you might start to explore the processes. Would that be right?
It's got an activities block in it,
Oh,
so I
so
think
it
that's
has.
probably where the processes sit.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Well, I think you've more than covered the theoretical knowledge that I have on it. So we'll dive into really understanding, what does the BMC or the BIC for some, what does that provide that perhaps other techniques we have as business analysts does not provide? And Thamer, if I can start with you on that one, please.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we've already touched on this. I think it's sort of its own kind of value proposition, as it were, lies in the fact that it's a one pager. So it can be really quick to draft and really easy to do sort of collaboratively, as we've already said. When we produced a few as a BA practice, we sort of crowdsourced the information from across the team, and it was really quick to do. Similarly, if you're working collaboratively with business stakeholders, it's fun, it's visual. It gets you thinking at a high level. I feel like it, unlike other sort of business architecture or business analysis artifacts, it puts the value proposition at the center, which I think is sort of a bit different. It gives more prominence to the sort of purpose of what you're doing and why you're interacting with your customers.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Helen, have you got anything you would like to add on that point in terms of what it provides that other techniques cannot?
I think it just keeps it fairly like high enough level to be sort of useful from a strategic perspective, because it forces you not to go down into too low a level, but enough that you can then think from it's a strategy tool, I see it as. So it should be, it's sort of like how are we going to, so people, the sort of leaders and sort of senior management, what do they need to then be able to do to make changes to the business? How do they need to change if it's related to a business? Or I've used it for a product perspective. What things do we need to put in place for launching a new product? What channels do we want? What key partnerships do we need? So it enables you to kind of do that action plan and goal setting, for your strategic planning.
It strikes me from what you both said and what Esther said on the previous question as well, that it's quite a useful technique that if you've got and you've done a lot of analysis, you've got these various perspectives, be it based on the value streams or the processes, the activities, the partners, etc. That if you might otherwise be a little bit devoid of having a way to present all of that information in a concise way on one page, that it's already there for you, so you don't have to maybe think about a completely new way to bring all those things together. That strikes me from what you said. Esther, what's your perspective on that same question?
I would say, firstly, it's very simple. I like the fact that it incorporates both internal and external factors. Some other BA techniques, not just the BA techniques, management techniques and everything techniques related, like the SWOT analysis, for example. Yes, we know our strengths, our weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, but it's still kind of narrow compared to the BMC. So with the BMC, you're still taking a look at the internal factors that affect your value proposition. You're also taking a look at the external factors, but you're taking a look at them in tiny details that end up making a lot of sense. Who are our customers? What problems are we solving as an organization, or what idea is this are we going to solve or are we going to create? How will our solution be delivered? And it's in those details that we as BAs, we shine forth, because we're able to actually bring out all these details and make it make sense to people. So it also covers, I would say, financials, like the financial sustainability. I'm still yet to see a technique, and I might be wrong. Maybe it's not just coming to the top of my head that incorporates finances into the entire structure. Yes, let's say for the SWOT analysis, for example, we have our strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Cost and revenue still comes in a tiny bit, but the BMC is so broad yet tiny and detailed, where you still also factor this in. So you have that holistic view of what you're trying to achieve, which is usually very helpful. And our superpowers as BAs is to make sure that every part of that idea or whatever project makes sense. And it's simple, like we're able to simplify it to people. So I'll say that's the strength for me of
Yeah.
what the BMC is.
Perfect. I mean, again, it sounds like from what you said as well, it's an opportunity for somebody BA working on the BMC, if that's their first layer that they're working on, to take an element such as the the cost structure as an example that I think you brought up, to then drill into that further, think about the business case perhaps, and then surface that in as part of the bigger round and bigger story as well. I wonder, Helen, are there any tools that you might recommend or that you've used when producing or viewing a business model canvas?
Yes, normally I've just downloaded the templates, because it's just the 9 areas you need to include. Or if I'm using doing a remote meeting, using Miro or Whiteboard, then the techniques I tend to be to get people to ideally sort of write in silence of each of the categories before discussing, because that's the general technique that I use.
Yeah.
Make sure everybody contributes. And then the key thing is really just getting the cross-functional number of people to make sure that they've got the different viewpoints and can cover it off. So really yeah.
And then, I mean, is it the way you would do it, Helen? Would you tend to take each of those 9 parts and almost allow the stakeholders to think about it separately, and then you discuss it as a group, or would you encourage them to look at all 9 all at once?
I usually do it one part at a time. So I normally start off with the value proposition, and then exhaust that first. And then I tend to do it from complete the business model canvas all around the as is first, and then I'd have a separate session for the to be. And then I'd plan other sessions afterwards, then discuss what do we do with it, because obviously it's not going to be as useful if we don't work out what we do with it afterwards, because it's all about then what it can then lead to, what insights does it give.
Excellent. Oh, thank you for clarifying that as well, Helen. Esther, are there any tools that you've come across and you've used on top of those mentioned by Helen?
I would say firstly, the BMC itself can actually Microsoft Word. Just create like a table and put in the tiny boxes. But for updated tools, Miro, we've used it on Miro and I think on Mural as well. They are preset templates but on all these other tools, I'll say they just make it really fancy. And fancy is good. It kind of helps. There are people that are visual learners that works best for them. So when they see it in multiple colors, oh, we haven't filled out the resource segment, and it's in blue. So that's where tools come in. But simple Microsoft Word, you can have just draft a table and list out the 9 building blocks and just fill it in. I'll say then if you're in a physical meeting, for example, where you practically have no tools and you have just a marker and a whiteboard, you're going to draw it on the whiteboard and populate it as well. So those are ways it can be used.
Excellent. And Thamer, you got anything you would add as well?
Yeah, the only thing I can add to that is that we have some business model canvases in BizDesign, which is our enterprise architecture tool. However, I cannot attest to how easy they are to create in BizDesign because I didn't do that myself. But yeah, I'm about to revisit that because we're in it's early days for us in terms of rolling out the tool. But it's certainly possible.
And it's someone who tends to favour and uses Visio a lot quite often.
Yeah.
Feels like that would be a perfect use of Visio to give a canvas as well. Or of course, I think as Esther said, you can use the whiteboard and a pen
Piece of
I guess
paper. Yeah.
going back to what Helen was saying as well, if you fundamentally going to encourage the team or the stakeholders to come together, you probably want something not particularly clunky. You want people to be able to interact and capture
Exactly.
what their main points are, rather than spend longer trying to figure out how to drag an object onto the board.
Yeah.
I wonder, Esther, are there any constraints or challenges that you've faced when it comes to either using, applying, or creating a BMC or BIC?
Even though I say it's a simple tool, I think one major challenge is that we tend to oversimplify some of the building blocks. We're trying to make it simple, but we now make it super simple, where at times there is now a deviation from the overall value. I think one major challenge is drawing the balance between how simple to make it, even though you want it to be simple. Then I'd say there have been situations where everybody just sees the building blocks and like, oh, let me fill in the revenue stream. I think we need to focus on this. Oh, someone says, oh, these are our key resources, and it just turns to a fill in the blank exercise rather than a collaborative effort where we sit down as a team to actually discuss and to actually like collaborate and find out what exactly we want to solve, what problem we are solving, and what solution we're providing. So in that kind of scenario, some team members would just turn it to a fill in the box, like, oh, let's just fill this in. Oh, we need to get this to the director for before we start preparing our project items. And I'm like, okay, you have filled this in. Do you understand what another person that filled in this other part of the building block is trying to say? So there are times we fall into that, we have that challenge where people are just focused on whatever section that relates to them, which is not supposed to be, because if you're working on a project, you should at least have an holistic idea, a holistic view of the entire value proposition. So I'll say that's like a major challenge, truthfully.
Excellent, thank you, Esther. Thamer?
So I guess something that makes me slightly nervous about using the business model canvas with business stakeholders directly, and this is probably why I haven't done it to date, although I'm about to take the plunge, is that because it's so simple, if you're using it sort of as an as-is view of an existing proposition, or part of the business, I fear that senior business stakeholders are going to think you're trying to sort of that it's trivial, and there isn't anything that they don't know on it. On the other hand, I kind of think also I have a fear that it could, especially when we're talking about developing new propositions, that it could be a challenge insofar as they might feel a bit threatened if there are big gaps in their knowledge, which it would absolutely expose. Although I get that it's obviously collaborative, but I think I'm just anticipating some nervousness, but we shall see.
That's it. And I guess that collaboration means hopefully that there is someone who's a little bit uncomfortable about their depth of knowledge in one area. Hopefully,
yeah, it's not a bad thing, is it? It's just managing the relationships, and sort of making it clear that you're not trying to expose gaps, and that you're both working towards the same goal.
That's right. It makes me think as well that perhaps if you were in that situation where everyone's looking around and you really just can't populate an area, that it's quite possibly as well that we've just got the wrong stakeholders in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's also true. Yeah.
One. So in itself, it's not a bad thing to find out early that you're not involved with the right stakeholders.
Yeah.
Excellent. And Helen?
Yeah, I mean, just follow on what Thamer said, really. It's getting the level of engagement right, and also, giving people a chance to think about it in advance so they can come prepared. That way, the other thing I've done is I've supplemented it with other techniques. So I've quite often done like the SWOT analysis as well to help. And then I've used something like, especially if it's like a new product or something brand new that people don't know much about, we've looked at empathy models and customer journeys, because they've got to think about the questions in terms of who their customers are and things like that, and what do they want to do. So sometimes I've had to supplement it with, sort of baby steps of like, right, we're going to do these other models first before we do the business canvas model to help us answer those questions.
It's an interesting point, Helen, when you talk about that, because it makes me wonder, if you were to, say, for example, explore the activities through like a high level business process, it seems to me that might be appropriate to visualize that in your box around business activities. From your experience, is that something that you would do, or would you go perhaps at a slightly different level when you present your BMC?
Well, it's supposed to remember it's looking at all the different 9 views. So it might be relatively easily to fill out one, like the activities that they currently do. Yes, they probably know, but when you're sort of like, that's why I always think you should have 2 different sessions, one for the as-is that people are familiar with. And then when it gets to the 2B, it's then thinking about, okay, do we know what the value is if this is new? Do we know what partnerships that we want going forward? So that's kind of where you've got to sort of start like prepping ahead in terms of, do we need to do any additional techniques so that we can be more confident that that's what we want to do? And it's getting the right level as well. So you need, quite often, I've worked with quite a few CEOs or people really sort of like high up in the organization, because this is at strategy level, so they may have the ideas in terms of the vision, in terms of like what type of things do they want, because only they will know about wanting to get, I don't know, external partnerships maybe with other people, or so only they can kind of, and that's where you've got to get the right level of engagement with it.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm glad as well you sort of brought up, and I know a few of you've all brought it up in different ways as well, that it can be used as a current state and target state as well. And importantly, when you mentioned target state there, default was to go, well, we need to understand the current state first, use it for that first, which is always nice to hear. So I think from personal experience, sometimes when you try to jump too quickly into the target state, you can very easily miss the things that you're already doing very well.
Well, that's it. And also, you can't put an action plan together then if you don't understand where you currently are.
Exactly. I wonder, I mean, we've spoken about challenges, but I wonder, are there some common mistakes as well that perhaps BAs or BA teams might make when they're using the canvas? And Thamer, is that such an easy question? I'm going to direct it to you.
Well, I think Esther's kind of already touched on this. I think from my experience, it's getting the right level of granularity of information in the boxes. So if you're too high level, it can be a bit, potentially a bit sort of meaningless. Equally, if you go down to into too much detail, you've got too much to put in a simple, one pager. So I think that's probably where most mistakes lie.
Excellent, thank you. And Helen, what are your view on that same point around mistakes?
Yeah, I just think it's just getting the right people together and setting up enough time to go through each of the 9 segments, and just setting people's expectations, really, because you're right, it's not many people, not necessarily a lot of people have heard of it or know what it is. So it's making sure that people understand, that how much time is needed from them, really, and what they're going to get from it.
Yeah, it seems like, I mean, but with many techniques that we use as BAs, that we shouldn't necessarily expect our stakeholders to upfront know what the technique is and know how they're supposed to help us. But hopefully through our coaching and our engagement with them, they'll sort of see us eliciting information from them, painting the picture of what we're hearing, bringing different perspectives together, so that then at the end of the exercise, they'll start to see the value of these techniques that we're bringing together. And maybe that might be something that they can take forward then and recommend to others that they see. I wonder, Esther, I haven't asked you anything in terms of common mistakes. Are there any that you would like to throw out there?
I think one common mistake, and I appreciate what Helen said, the structure of having the as is and the to be's, because it makes us, there's this major question: when exactly do we work on the business model canvas? Is it going to be at the beginning or mid-project? Like, there has to be that definition of when. Now, that leads to a mistake where if it's before, like at the very beginning, it feels like everything on the business model canvas is like an assumption. Like we're just making assumptions. We're trying to see, oh, this is this, this is that. Now, if we are able to now determine, okay, another time when we go through the business model canvas, we're able to validate what assumptions we had at the initial stage. I think it would help rather than just being an assumption board. Let me use that word, like it being an assumption board rather than a strategic business tool. And I would say most times at the very beginning of the project, we just fill it in and that's all. There are many teams that would not go back to say, oh, does this really apply? Like now, the two Bs, does this really apply? Is this re like, does this really exist? So I would say it's ignoring the need for validation. That's a key mistake. But if we can draw the line on, okay, when exactly do we want to have the BMC? Are we going to have it at the beginning of the project? Or if we're having iterations, or will it be at the beginning of each iteration, or what exactly are we like, where exactly are we bringing it into? So that just basically also helps us capture the fact that there might be changes, and it's not just the one at the initial when it was created. There might be changes. The world is dynamic, like the business world is, it's not static. Different things
Yeah.
happen, regulations come up. So it allows us to actually factor that in. So if we can solve the issue of when it should be worked on, I think it would really be helpful to avoid a lot of mistakes.
And I guess that's a really key point because the team and those collaborating with it need to have that adaptive mindset so that
Hmm.
they can react to things as they change and they can react to
Exactly.
different views and the information that comes in. So yeah, I'm glad you made that point. Thank you. Um, wonder, Helen, sorry to put you on the spot with this one, but is there any like powerful insight or decisions that you've been able to drive from using business model canvas yourself in the past?
Yeah, quite a lot actually. I mean, when I set up the my sort of consultancy, I actually did a business model canvas of my own business.
Yeah.
So I found that really, really useful because it enables you to think about, what revenue streams do I want, the cost structure. So it forces you to think about the sort of things that you might not realize you need to think about. And then in terms of, I've used it at the beginning of like a transformation to come up with a transformation program. So to understand what activities do we need to get there, and then I've used things like being able to plan out with the directors what order we need to do things and what's the most important, because you've got so many different 9 areas. Some might be more important to sort out, or might have more actions against than others.
Yeah.
So, for example, when I worked sort of a startup, we kind of identified that actually we didn't have the right key resources, and we had to put an action plan in and do capability assessments and models to work how we'd get there. We looked at, we wanted to go into Middle East, so looking at the customer segments. So then the questions then were about, how do we get into the Middle East? What do we need to do for that? Then what partners do we need? We need to work with these particular people. So you can get such powerful insights from it. It sounds like a simple tool, but when you're actually saying, right, well, how do we get there then?
Yeah. And it's a really powerful point you made, because I think as you're talking about those examples, the fact is visual as well means that I guess all the people around the table, whether it's real, in person or virtually, will all have points that resonate with them and that they see are as important, and they can ask those questions. You mentioned obviously location. That might be one that jumps out to one individual as to why we operate in Europe. We could be going to Esther's part of the world as well.
Yeah, that's it. It just brings out those key business decisions that need to be made, and what's then most important. You might only work on particular one area, but at least you've considered all 9 areas to then work out what's most important.
Wonder, Esther, do you have a view yourself on any powerful insights you've been able to take from using the BMC?
I think an example I would give was a healthcare transformation project. We walked through this with a couple of the women in Agile, and the initial stage is having what the business case is and having the problem statement. And while walking through all the 9 building blocks, priorities kind of shifted. Yes, we want to move to this particular tool. Yes, we want to be developed in this particular, like we want to move with the trend in technology. We want to have this. And at the end of the day, we discovered what was actually needed was just to solve tiny pain points and not necessarily bring in new tools that introduced complexities. So in that particular, because bringing in another technology now, you'd have to start training people on new technologies, or you have to bring in like some of the technologies had modules. Oh, you need to bring in the module managers. Like there's a whole lot of complexities, not because the technology was not necessary or not because the technology was not required, but at that point, the focus it would have actually been better to focus on getting rid of the pain points that people were having and make a transition, like a transitional process where high technology was implemented and not just pushing that on people. So the BMC was usually like very, very helpful to identify those priorities and the initial priorities focusing on the user, focusing on the customer was actually what trumped whatever we needed to do at that point. So I would say it could be useful to reorder priorities for every project. So you just have to be ready that your priorities might shift because you're dealing based on, even though they might be assumptions that are actually facts with
Yeah.
the BMC.
Excellent. And what you said there is really emphasised the point Helen made as well about being able to take different stakeholders and really focus on what's important to them as well.
Exactly.
And Thamer, have you got anything you would like to add to that point?
Yeah, so slightly different example and not really a business decision per se, but I was working on an initiative when I was managing the business analysis practice to start looking at developing a business architecture capability, which has now come to fruition. Well, it's still early days, but there is a role of a business architect. And as a whole different topic, I realise that, sort of business analysis to business architecture, but I'd love to explore that.
Getting closer all the time, isn't it?
Yeah. But so I was working with a small team of consultants, and we were sort of trying to explore sort of foundational elements of business architecture and what we might be able to produce and tooling and all the rest of it. And everything we put in front of the head of architecture initially, he sort of deemed as not very practical. So, for example, one thing he suggested we do is sort of provide some kind of visual representation of our current breakfast proposition in Premier Inn. And we produced all sorts of stuff. We had a value chain for breakfast, probably. We had this really, really complex sort of service map, I guess, with a swim lane for every kind of business architecture, business analysis deliverables. So we had a mapping to applications as well. So we had the value stream across the top. We had mappings to capabilities. We had everything, you name it. And he said, no, that's absolutely ridiculous. You can't put that in front of the business because it's just going to blow their minds. And then we did a sort of mini business model canvas for breakfast. And he said, da-da, that's exactly what I wanted to see. So that's been the sort of most powerful moment, I guess, that I've had in my experience with business model canvases. But I'm hoping to drive some business decisions soon.
Excellent. It's so nice to hear about a concept I'm familiar with. I'm definitely familiar with the Premier Inn breakfast as well. And it's making me
that's good to hear.
There were 9 different parts to the Premier Inn breakfast. You could almost draw some shapes on your BMC to represent each one of them. Might make
yes.
But you can do with what you will on that idea. So I will not be offended if you ditch it completely. Excellent. I wonder as well, Lynn, I mean, in terms of, Thamer, I'll stick with yourself on this one, in terms of, is there any advice that you might share with BAs that are either new to the business model canvas or using it themselves that might make them a little bit better or more effective or more comfortable?
I guess I just, I would just suggest coming up with an area that perhaps you know something about already, and just trying to draft one, share it with your colleagues, see what people think, see what, if they think things are missing, if they can, if they can understand what you've pulled together, and whether they get any value out of it. I'd say just have a go.
Brilliant, excellent advice to start with. Thank you. Helen, any advice from you?
Yeah, it's what, it's just follow the process, really. It's sort of like, you just got to trust it and follow it. So, you already know what 9 areas you want to talk about. It's just go through each one in turn and just give everyone a chance to sort of facilitate it as a meeting. The beauty of it is that, it's quite sort of simple in terms of the structure. The hardest bit is getting the right people together and getting buy-in that it's worth doing.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, I know it's been said a few times. It really does emphasise that getting the right people together in the room, irrespective of the techniques you're applying, that's your most effective enabler as a BA to get the right outcomes.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is just to make sure that they get something from it. So it isn't just doing this model canvas. That's almost at the beginning of the process. It's having them follow up meetings with them to go, right, okay, so what actions does this mean that we need to do then to achieve this business model canvas? Is there anything we need to put in place? And that's what will make it really powerful, because then you're getting those insights.
Yeah, I suppose on that basis, that many people in the room, they might just see it as a picture you're putting together that brings those 9 components into one, and they won't be familiar with the term. And I guess if you put, we're going to tell the team up front when they've never heard of it, we're going to pull together a business canvas, that might confuse people from the start.
Yeah.
But perhaps at the end, when you've got the finished article, then that's a nice time to tell people, well, actually, the thing you've just come together, collaborated on, provide your insight on, and produced, that's actually a business model canvas. Now we're going to do the same thing for target state.
Yeah, I mean, I was at a sort of a company once where what we did as a result is we actually did a version of that to send out and discuss for the whole company, so they could see that this is what your company is about, this is what it's about achieving. And so everybody in the company, it was included in the town hall, and everyone had a copy, so that it had like a picture on a page of exactly what buy-in, because they're all consultants at different places. So it was really handy to get people to understand, this is the company you work for, this is what we do, this is the value. So it was a really good communication tool as well.
It definitely seems so. It seems the more the 3 of you are sharing, the more I'm thinking there's a more benefit and more use of it, actually. So I've created myself a little mini to-do list off the back of this, which is no bad thing. Esther, I'm not sure I've asked you whether you've got any advice that you want to share.
I think Helen and Thamer already said it. It's getting the right people together. The value is actually in the conversation. Like having stakeholders that have that belonging, that they actually contributed to something, that their thoughts were valuable, their ideas recognized. I think that goes a long way. So we shouldn't aim for perfection. Let's trust the process. Let's trust that conversation process amongst our stakeholders. We're definitely going to come up with something good if you have the right, like Helen would always emphasize, the right people. So that really helps. Then I would say we should still, back to my earlier point, let's treat it as a living document that we don't just do at the beginning of the project. Let's make it updated. Like, oh, we're about to run another iteration. Let's look at our BMC again. Let's circle back and see what's going on, what needs to be updated. So because projects evolve, ideas evolve, markets shift. So we should treat it as a living document, I'd say.
Brilliant. Yeah, brilliant advice, Esther, to end on that one. Thank you very much. So we've spoken about what the business model canvas is, why you would use it, benefits you would get from using it. I wonder if, and Thamer, I'll start with you on this one, how you might see the business model canvas evolving, or whether you see it being replaced or augmented by AI perhaps in the future.
If I'd had time, I was going to, and maybe Esther and Helen have tried this, but I reckon you could very effectively use AI to give you a head start with a business model canvas with access to the right data. So I'm gonna set myself a task tomorrow to to try and generate one based off or maybe internally, or maybe for something completely different. I don't know, just because I mean, it's interesting though, isn't it? Because then, as Esther's just said, the value is in the conversation. If you populate it using AI, potentially you're sort of kind of shortcutting that conversation and you might lose something. But it's a really interesting question. I think it could definitely help. But as with anything AI generated, you've obviously got to validate what you're what you're producing or what it's producing. In terms of evolution, I was just thinking earlier when Esther mentioned that it's also called a business initiative canvas. I've also seen other versions of it that are used for different purposes, like the operating model canvas. It's very similar, and so I think we actually have a vision canvas at Whitbread that is more sort of designed to capture the problem statement and objectives and constraints and all the rest of it, but it looks exactly like a business model canvas. So I think that that template will continue to sort of evolve in terms of the purpose that it's used for. Just a thought.
I think you're probably right. I mean, on the basis that when people start getting comfortable with the business model canvas and how it can paint that picture all in one, it's probably be no surprise when you think, actually, I've got a slightly different use case for it.
Yeah.
I want to paint that same picture. I mean, it makes me think, I won't put the pressure on you to come up with the answer on this one, but it makes me think, the business architecture might be a good subject to try and use the business model canvas to surface some of the business architecture thinking and output through it. I'll probably defer that to my internal colleague.
Well, I think it is a business architecture tool as much as it's a business analysis tool. Yeah.
There we go. We can explore that further. Who knows? We might see one of you at a future BA conference talking about how you've used the AI to populate your business model canvas. I wonder, Helen, is there any thoughts from you in terms of how you might see it evolving?
It's a good strategic tool. I mean, like I used to run these strategy days at one of the companies I was at, and I used business model canvas one year, and then I changed to scenario planning the next year. And that achieved the same type of outcomes, really. So there are other alternative tools you can use, as well as SWOT that I mentioned earlier as well. So it's just using what you think's the most appropriate at the time, really.
That's it. And I guess because you've got the 9 segments, you can sort of appraise which are the most important, perhaps sometimes, and therefore, if it's SWOT as an example, they're the things you really want to focus in on. There's not necessarily the need to use all of the blocks that you might find in a business model canvas, for that example.
Yeah. I mean, it depends what your end goal is, really. Whether it's a list of initiatives for transformation program, or whether it's working out what you need to do for a new product. So it's sort of like, it's just, I swapped scenario planning just because I thought it was interesting to think of the business from a different point of view, and I think that might have generated different initiatives than I would have got otherwise. So it's just sort of like, it's just being aware of other techniques and just what's most appropriate or what's worth trying.
Well, that's it. Yeah, no, that's it. I mean, the first step is try the technique, get a feel for when it's useful, and then decide when to take it out of your toolkit in the future as a result. Esther, anything that you might like to add in terms of how the evolution of the model canvas?
I would say it has actually evolved. There are different industries and different sectors that call it different names. Like in the lean, for example, it's actually called a lean model canvas, and it has the similar building blocks of the BMT. Now, I also work with a mission organization, a nonprofit, where we work with missionaries in different countries of the world. Now, we have a mission model canvas. I also kind of also Googled it to see if there were other templates. There are numerous templates. So there's also a mission model canvas. So I think it's just been adapted to whatever an organization needs it for or whatever an industry needs it for, but it's still a canvas. It evolves and AI is there. I don't think AI is going to take the place of the BMC in terms of the conversations, the people, because it's a collaborative tool where we practically have conversations to drive out and populate what the nine building blocks are. So yes, there's going to be AI to refine whatever we have discussed, and we need to put it in words and have the right words. We could use AI to refine, but I don't think it actually takes the place of the people because the value of the business model canvas is actually in the conversations that the stakeholders have. So
yeah, that's such an excellent point, Esther. I feel like it's such an excellent point. It probably feels like the best point to stop on, actually, as it's a focus on conversation. We're having a nice conversation that I feel like we could go on a bit longer, but for the benefit of yourselves, we won't. You'll be pleased to know. So maybe we'll just stop there while we're ahead. We had such a nice ending from Esther.
yeah.
So all there is to say in that case then is to thank the three of you for sharing your insight. It's been really interesting to hear about, quite frankly, a technique that I read about. I'm sure it was in Business Requirements by Deborah Ball. I'm sure that's where I saw it many years ago. Never got around to using it. I regret, but I think I will do now. Anyway, but thank you for your time.
Thank you so
And I look
much.
forward to seeing you and hearing from you in the future.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.